Tennessee baseball is undefeated through 2 games in Omaha at the College World Series. Does that put them in the driver's seat to win their first national championship in program history? We will discuss today on the Volunteer State. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside the Knoxville News Sentinel's Mike Wilson, who is kind enough to join us from Omaha. So, Mike, Tennessee 2-0. It wasn't always the easiest 2-0. Certainly in game one, Tennessee had their back against the wall. But what is the mood, would you say, sort of around the team, being there in Omaha, covering them now that they're through the first 2 games with an important 2-0 record?
Yeah, I mean, they have to feel good. This is an unfamiliar position in Omaha. Tennessee's been sent into the losers bracket immediately in each of the previous 2 trips under Tony Vitello. Yesterday's game, the Sunday game, is the most important game in the first half of the College World Series. It's the most important game in the regional as well. It's a game that allows you to go 1-0 and win. Whereas if you lose that game, you have to go 3-0 to get out of that bracket. I've talked about that at length in the past, but that is such a massive swing when you talk about where you want to be positioned. In the College World Series, it's an even bigger advantage. In a regional, it's back-to-back games. You have 2 days off now for Tennessee. You don't play again until Wednesday. So your pitching comes back perfectly fresh other than Drew Beam. Hunter Ensley gets some time to rest. And overall, you're in the driver's seat. Absolutely, as you said. You're 1 win away from playing in the final series at this point.
Let's go back to that game one, because, I mean, it looked like it was, last call for Tennessee, and they're getting booted out the door until the 9th inning. And then, of course, rallied. We know they have the bats. We've talked about that on previous editions, and the bats showed up in the 9th, hitting. I mean, they had offense throughout the game. It was a myriad of other problems that resulted in them being behind going into the 9th. Do you think that will be the game we look back on and say, this is maybe sort of the beginning of where they won a national championship? You mentioned how important game 2 is. And if they lose that one, game 1 is a little bit for naught. But I'm just thinking about the emotional swing of possibly losing that game would be sort of a repeat of past seasons, coming into the College World Series with the momentum and starting with a loss versus rallying, winning, taking that momentum into game 2. Just how do you think we will look back on their rally in game 1?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of game that championship teams have, right? That's the thing that championship teams are capable of doing, able to do, and have to do at some point typically to get to that stage. And yeah, Tennessee wins that game, and you're kind of like, yeah, okay, they're going to win the whole thing now. That's just, you see a momentum shift like that. You see a team capable of doing that, and that's kind of where your head goes. I think probably across the spectrum, from sports writer to other team fan to Tennessee fan to anyone watching, you're like, yeah, okay. That's kind of the game that sends that message into the head. Because it was terrible baseball for both teams, largely for the first 4 innings. Tennessee had capitalized on some Florida State mistakes, then made a whole bunch of their own. It was not a great pitching performance, not a good fielding performance, but the offense, as we've talked about throughout this season, is just so stinking good that they're able to make up for that. And scoring 12 runs in Omaha is not easy to do. You've seen Tennessee's past couple appearances. It's probably about 10 runs total in last year's College World Series. So it was a tremendous performance offensively. And yeah, when a team does that, you start to think, all right, well, this might be a little bit of a different outcome than what you've seen in the past.
So, Mike, let's look at the path ahead. This is all very fluid. We're recording this on a Monday morning. We know there will be games today, not involving Tennessee. But as you sit now, do you see teams out there that could pose problems for Tennessee? Maybe not necessarily in its half of the regional or its quadrant, because it's, as you said, pretty in good position having won game 2. But who out there is lurking that maybe Tennessee doesn't want to face down the road if they could help it?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's going to get either Florida State or North Carolina on Wednesday. The winner of that game Tuesday will advance to Wednesday. Both those teams a little bit hit on pitching, obviously, at this point. I'm going to have played 3 games to Tennessee's 2. But again, that is where that day off that those teams will have as well between Sunday and Tuesday does factor in as well. Neither of those teams has a 4th starter. That's not a common thing that teams have, unless you're the 2022 Vols, in which case your fourth starter is Blade Tidwell, who's going to be a big leaguer probably by the end of the year. That aside, Tennessee's got an inherent advantage on those teams. I think Florida State's offense is probably the biggest threat remaining on this side of the bracket for Tennessee. It's a very good offensive team. Obviously saw that the other day. They're hitting the ball super well so far through the College World Series. Looking at the other side, Florida and Texas A&M are two extremely talented teams. Florida obviously lost that opening matchup. They play in an elimination game today after the time of this recording. So Florida could be eliminated by that point. Kentucky and A&M are really interesting. Tennessee played an outstanding series against Kentucky and Lexington earlier this season that it won in the rubber match, I think 12-11, 11-10. Christian Moore had a 3-homer game that was big. Kentucky, I picked them to lose in the regional and super regional. I haven't really bought in on that team, but they find a way to win. They're the kind of anti-Tennessee in some ways. They aren't predicated on the long ball. They don't have a long list of MLB prospects in this draft, but they're just a dang good team that wins baseball games. I think that probably is the biggest threat left, especially given that A&M is a little bit banged up, losing Braden Montgomery and a pitcher as well in the super regional. So, yeah, I think Kentucky's probably the biggest threat on the other side of the bracket at this point.
Do you think Tennessee feels like it is the team to beat? I mean, I know we talked before, they were trying to go into this with the mentality of house money, number one overall seed, never wins this tournament, go out and prove everybody wrong, but play for ourselves type of mentality. But now that they're there, now that they're 2-0, do you get any sense of, I guess, self-assuredness that they think, hey, we're the number one team. Maybe there hasn't been a dominant team this year, but we've been the best team out there. We are the team to beat. Or are you picking up on a different type of mood?
I don't pick up on that kind of top dog cockiness, whatever you want to call it. There's certainly a high level of confidence, as there should be. And Tennessee should be the team to beat. They've been the team to beat in Vegas since this tournament started, since before this tournament started. And they've been the number one team in the country for basically a month and a half now. So they've been that team for a while. But I think I'll kind of parrot Tony Vitello here in explaining this team. There is a maturity here. And I know that for many who have not followed Tennessee baseball this season, there is a preconceived notion of what Tennessee baseball is because of what the 2022 team and even the 2021 team, I mean, that was a villainous team too in some ways, but maybe a little bit quieter than the 2022 team was. This team is nothing like that. This team is equally talented, has the same number of wins, a program record 57, but it plays the game with such a quiet, kind of simmering confidence and maturity, and it's very different. I think that's why this team has handled everything it's handled, from losing A.J. Russell to probably not having the start to SEC play that they wanted. They've been able to kind of bounce through everything and not emotionally swing. And I think that's a credit to that because this team just seems to have a really calm, centered approach about it.
When you're in the ballpark Friday night, going into the ninth, they're facing the deficit. Of course, you're working, and I know how hectic that can be. You're trying to get your content ready, you're on deadline, all that. But did you sense at all that there might be a rally coming here, or did it catch you by surprise? How did you see it going into that pivotal inning?
Yeah, so I had my whole losing story done pretty much as of probably the 6th inning. In the 8th inning, Tennessee had 3 straight 2-out hits, including a Dylan Dreiling RBI single. And I started writing a winning story at that point. I had a separate Word document file I started working in, just a generic walks it off sort of story, because it did feel like Tennessee was still in the game. With its offense, they talk about 1 inning away, which they are, because that's what this offense is capable of. But there was kind of a feeling of, they've probably played better than Florida State the final 3 innings or so. Nate Snead's shut it down here. Kavaris Tears leads off with a triple there in the 9th. And then you're thinking, okay. Dean Curley hits that long fly ball, and you're thinking that might get out, doesn't quite get out, sack fly. And it's like, okay, well, resets the inning, but down 2. Yeah, so going into the ninth, it did feel like there was kind of a shot. I won't sit here and say, yeah, I totally saw Tennessee scoring 4 runs in the ninth, 3 of them with 2 outs. Crazy check swing. Was it, wasn't it? Like all those moments. You can't see that coming, but there was kind of a slight feeling of Tennessee's not dead. They're not dead yet. And yeah, that was one of the crazier things I've seen in a while. And that, dates back to obviously Drew Gilbert's walk-off against Wright State in terms of Tennessee baseball moments that really stand out in a high fashion. Yeah, so couldn't sense that exact outcome, but didn't think it was over yet.
Well, you opened the door on the check swing, so let's go there. I feel like we got to address it at least for a moment. So much focus on that check swing. Does Florida State have a gripe? Do you think, having seen it in real time and then having seen the replays that keep showing and showing and showing, especially if you're on social media?
Well, I'll say this: Blake Burke has a gripe. He did not go around against North Carolina on Sunday when he got rung up. I thought Blake Burke swung live in that game against Florida State. Replay was very 50-50. I think that's a call where, regardless of which way it went, you're like, yeah, okay, I could see why it went that way. There was a strong conviction in the umpire saying no swing. Felt confident in that. Obviously, the Florida State dugout felt differently. Florida State fans feel differently. I think if it had gone against Tennessee fans would feel the exact same way that Florida State fans are feeling.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's again, that is such a split hair call that I thought live he went. Replay, I was less sure on replay actually, but I still think it was very 50-50 on whether it was or wasn't. But that said, Blake Burke still to go up there and get a hit. I mean, the game still could have ended in that at bat regardless. So I understand the griping. I understand the frustration with that moment. But the game still could have ended. The game wasn't taken out of Florida State's hands necessarily in that moment because Blake Burke still to drive in 2 runs. They still had to score another run. So there were still opportunities to win. It's not like that check swing was a ball 4 that walked in the winning run that was standing on third sort of situation.
Yeah, and just sort of the psychology of umpiring, I kind of wonder if that is in a different moment in the game. If that check swing happens with 2 strikes in the 6th inning, does it get rung up at that point versus 9th inning? You're really going to end it on a check swing. I don't know. I'm not saying that factors in, but you do wonder about the psychology of umpiring in that moment. And are you going to ring someone up on a check swing in the 9th inning of a World Series game? Maybe that's not the way it should be for an umpire, but I do wonder if that sort of plays on the mind. So let's look at the pitching going forward. And again, acknowledging that this is fluid. You mentioned the days off being critical, a nice bonus for Tennessee. What does the pitching situation look like for the Vols moving forward here? Tennessee's
got it exactly where it wants it. It can hand the ball to Xander Sechrist on Wednesday. It's typical game 3 guy, which is what I assume they will do. In theory, Tennessee could run it right back to its Friday night combo of Chris Stamos and AJ Causey if it really wanted to. I think you start Xander Sechrist to stay on a regular schedule, especially heading in toward, if you win that game, you make the final, then you can throw your Friday night combo. So I assume Xander Sechrist is going to get the start. He's been Tennessee's best starting pitcher for the last month. Quality start after quality start. A guy that was an opener at midseason, it's now their most consistent starter at this point in the season, which is really an impressive feat to say about who Xander has become. And then everyone else is available. I think Drew Beam's the only one you say is not available. Probably Chris Stamos, AJ Causey. But again, you win that game, you get rest again. You get another couple days off to get back. So Tennessee's got it set up about as well as it can. Nate Snead's ready. Aaron Combs didn't throw. Kirby Connell's available every single day of the year. So, I mean, Tennessee's got its bullpen. It's got things exactly what it would like to with that group.
What's the fan presence like in Omaha? I see the shot count, the jello shot count at Rocco's. Tennessee leading the way there, and not necessarily surprised on that front. But, I mean, do Vols fans, do they have the biggest, loudest presence at Omaha? Or is there a group rivaling them? What's your temperature on that?
It's hard to gauge. The press box doesn't afford you a view of the whole ballpark. You get the outfield, obviously. You get kind of part of the first baseline, very little of the third baseline. So it's hard to tell specifically. But I mean, the fan presence in Omaha in general is cool for all the teams. For general baseball fans, it's probably my favorite sporting event that I get to cover. This is the third time here in 4 years, and the coolness of it hasn't really worn off. It's just a very cool baseball spectacle in all the funnest ways.
Have you been to Rocco's and seen the famous Jello shot scene? And I'm seeing Tennessee fans are paying, I guess, $10 for a Jello shot, if I understand correctly. $5 going to the bar, $5 going to NIL, and $10 for a Jello shot. I don't particularly care for Jello shots. The last one I had was a couple years ago. The bartender gave it to me for free. I understand fandom, but I can't really, in too many circumstances, imagine paying $10 for a Jello shot. But hey, swept up in the moment, and you think you're giving NIL. I guess I get it from that front. But have you been to Rocco's and partaken in a Jello shot yourself?
I have not been. I haven't even been over there. But I will say, I think that's the greatest marketing scheme in the history of planet Earth. I mean, even the $5 thing for Jello shot. But my understanding is it's donated to charities in Omaha for the most part. My understanding is the bar doesn't take proceeds. So also absolutely tremendous. I mean, the amount of money raised off that is through the roof. And obviously the volunteer club with their little situation with the Rocco's is also raking in some money there because Tennessee is looking like it's going to run away with that thing. Maybe rival the Jello shot total that LSU put up a year ago, which is a concerning feat actually, because the Cajun fan base put those things down last year. That's for sure.
That's true. If you're rivaling LSU fans on that front, it means you're doing some serious work. But when I think about what might lie ahead for Tennessee here, and we've been talking about the possibility of a national championship, it is sort of the elephant in the room, would be the first for this program, but also for a fan base that's hungry for another national championship, really in any sport, any team sport in particular. It would be a big deal to Vols fans. As you think about it, some of the other teams there have won national championships in the past. We've talked about Florida being in this tournament. They won, it was 2017. Do you think, I know you don't speak for every fan base, but do you think a national championship would mean more to Tennessee than perhaps any other program that's there? Because I was just thinking about that. I think Vols fans would go bananas over this team winning it all. It's a program that's kind of taken their heart the last few seasons, and because this program's never had a national championship in baseball, and really you have to go back to Pat Summitt Lady Vols to find a national championship that Tennessee fans were celebrating. So do you think it could mean more to Tennessee than maybe anybody else in this field in Omaha?
I think it's plausible. I think the schools that would rival that, Kentucky comes to mind. This is their first time in the College World Series period.
Yeah.
So going 1-for-1 and winning a natty is a pretty cool claim to be able to make. So the Wildcats come to mind pretty quickly. I think Florida State comes to mind as well because it's a program that had such historic success under Mike Martin, then wasn't so great under the next regime. And then Link Jarrett has come in and got that program right back. He never really fully fell off exactly, but wasn't at this level. So I think Florida State's another program that this would mean a ton to, just because so much of that success had been under one coach. So doing it again under a new coach would really say something. The Tennessee thing's crazy, man. There is a love affair with the program. You've seen that. There's a love affair with Tony Vitello. If you're on the field at Lindsey Nelson Stadium or at Charles Schwab Field the past few days, like the way that fans are yelling for Tony Vitello and chanting his name, it's really unique. That the way that the fan base has gravitated to Tony in the same way that I think Tony has gravitated to the fan base and built what this has become very much from the ground up. When you think about where this program was when he took over, I think it'd be a pretty special moment overall. I looked up the stat last night. Tennessee now has 208 wins in the last 4 seasons. They had 212 total in the 8 years before Tony Vitello was hired. So in theory, he is winning it twice a clip or double the clip of the 2 previous coaches that were at Tennessee. So it would mean a whole lot to the fan base, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And I think for this being the program that does it, that kind of makes it extra special because this is one that seems to hold a very special place in Tennessee fans' hearts.
What would it mean for Tony? Because we talked last week about where he ranks in the college baseball pecking order. We looked at it through the lens of basically if you could have someone to take over your program, build a program. You had Tony number 1, just barely edging out Jay Johnson from LSU. So, I mean, a guy that's already at or near the top of his profession. What does a national championship, if he can get it done, do you think mean for him?
I mean, it would mean anything to a coach, right? Anything and everything to win that title. And I think, too, the uniqueness of this is Tony Vitello's first head coaching job factors into that. I know he's someone who has talked about in the past the fact that John Curry took a shot on him, gave him an opportunity after he was an Arkansas assistant for a long time. He'd had some other interviews for other jobs, including SEC jobs, and didn't get those. And Tennessee's the one that gave him a shot. And man, he's made John Curry look very, very smart for a very long time now with how well he has done. So it would mean everything, obviously. I mean, you hear Tony talk about it. He grew up with his dad as a coach, grew up seeing his dad win state titles in soccer and in baseball. So there's also uniqueness to the coaching side of it. I think that's why you see him love being a college coach so much is this is the life that he's been around for so long. So I think that would be an absolutely tremendous moment. And obviously a validation, too, of all the work you put in as an assistant throughout the years, because Tony Vitello, the year after his playing career ended at Missouri, he was the volunteer assistant at Missouri. I mean, he launched into coaching. There was no playing career for Tony Vitello. He launched into coaching. He's a coach. And seeing those 22-ish years of coaching pay off would be a tremendous thing, I'm sure.
I was struck by the John Curry reference there, and looking back on his AD tenure, brief though it was, got the Tony Vitello
really good hires.
Yes.
Chris Woodruff as the men's tennis coach was also a tremendous hire.
And Curry, correct me if I'm wrong, he brought back the Lady Vols name as well, right? That had been retired, and I believe
Dave Hart. I can't remember the history of that because that predates both of us.
Yeah, I believe it was may have been Curry. So in any event, it did some things right before it jumped the rails. Very, I mean, as every Vol fan knows at the end. But let's close here, Mike, because you mentioned Tennessee was the favorite in Vegas before this tournament started, and I don't really know why that would change now that Tennessee's 2-0 at this point. But let's say the Vegas odds makers are taking a well-earned vacation, and they are handing the baton to you. I'm not asking maybe for your specific odds, but is Tennessee still your odds-on favorite? And then if you were a handicapper setting odds, I was kind of getting at this a little bit earlier, but a little more directly, who would follow up maybe number 2 and number 3 in the Vegas odds if you were setting the odds at this point in the tournament?
It was John Curry, by the way.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah.
Don't want to give credit where it wasn't due. So it was John Curry, not Dave Hart. That did that. Dave Hart hired Rick Barnes, though, so good hire there as well. I think the 2 and 3 would come from the other side of the bracket for me. And again, I think that's Kentucky and Texas A&M in that order. I don't think that's exactly a hot take, given that those are the 2 teams playing the winner's side today. And Tennessee's already on the 2-0 start on the other side. So it's kind of a natural inherent thought that those are the top 3. But once Florida lost, I think it was clear to me that on the other side, those are the other top 2 that matter. Just because Florida, from a talent perspective, is right on par there with the Tennessee, Florida State, and A&M. Didn't have a good regular season, but when a talented team gets hot late, crazy things can happen, and that's where Florida's been. And I don't believe they will have the pitching to get back out of that side of it now after falling into the loser side. So, yeah, I think Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas A&M in that order. Definitely can't set exact odds because I am not a bettor at heart, so I don't even fully understand how those numbers all work.
Fair enough. You know what you know, and sometimes it's important to know what you don't know. What we know is Tennessee is 2-0 in Omaha. They're in the catbird seat. Mike Wilson will be covering it all the way to the finish line. You can find all of his work over at knoxnews.com. And thanks for stopping by to listen to this edition of the Volunteer State.